All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Rep by Rep Strength Podcast. And today I'm excited to sit down with Coach Jason Roberson from Ball State University. And this is a very exciting podcast for me because this is, first mentor I had, first person I learned anything from as far as human performance goes. So this goes all the way back to sitting in Ball State lecture hall back in probably 2007. And Coach Robe came in and gave a description about, what is sport performance? What does he do? What's his day-to-day? Who's he work with? And that was what that class started out doing, was bringing in all these professionals and talking about the areas that kind of bridge out from exercise science. So anyway, that was the first time I met Coach Robe, and then started going down to the varsity weight room and hanging out every day for the next 3 years, basically. So anyway, Coach Robe, thanks for coming on. If you can go ahead and just give audience a little background about, where you're from, philosophy, et cetera.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Travis. Again, Jason Roberson. I'm the Director of Strength Conditioning at Ball State University. I've been here now, this is getting old, 17 years. I can't believe I've been in the game that long. But yeah, I've been here for 17 years. I really enjoy Ball State, a great school. I have been, I've been mentoring now for 23 years. I had a couple of grad students at Drake University when I was there. And so I've been mentoring for quite a while. I've had a lot of amazingly intelligent students come through that I've gotten to work with. Travis, you're one of them, obviously. And so it's been a long growing process, and hopefully it continues.
Yeah. And that was one thing we were talking about right before we kicked off was, I felt like from the moment I started down in the weight room, not knowing anything about human performance, I felt welcomed and, like I couldn't ask a bad question. I wasn't getting yelled at for asking a stupid question or whatever. But there have been other places I've been where they're not nearly as welcoming. They don't want to teach. They don't want to. It's more of, we've always done it this way kind of mindset. But you were saying how that you made your weight room like that by design. Can you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So my mentors were Jim Romagna and Mike Cotterman. Jim Romagna owns Merge Performance in Dubuque, Iowa, and he also is a professor in University of Dubuque. And then Mike Cotterman, the last I spoke with him, he was still at University of Wyoming, which were ironically Mike Mueller. Do you remember Mike Mueller?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mike was at Wyoming for a while, so they got to work together. But those two were incredibly open and incredibly inviting for learning situations. And so I knew that when I got out on my own, one of the biggest things I want to make sure I offered was anybody that came to me that wanted to learn about strength conditioning, that I would be willing and able to teach them and work with them on that. Like I said, I don't always have the answers. I don't claim to always have the answers, but what I do say is I'm going to give you the best answer I have. And if I don't know it, I'll look it up and I'll try to find it for you, or we can work together and try to find it.
Yeah, that was one thing that, me and Brandon Van Mater were talking about recently was we wish that there was a microphone that recorded all of the conversations that we had in the weight room, because the time I was there, we would get into good discussions about training and asking questions. And there was so much knowledge being dropped because of the people who had come through that were working on, PhDs and masters and things of that nature at the time. That would come through was, you have Mike Lawrence, who was studying accommodating resistance with powerlifting. So I remember him running some experiments down the weight room, and then Keith Suttle was doing some stuff with golf, I believe. And then Andy Galpin was doing PhD work at the time. And, so you just got a bunch of guys that were down there, and I was trying to just be a sponge and soak everything up. But
you and me both, man. I tell you what, getting to be around guys like that is just amazing. Like, I felt as much of a student as I did a mentor at times, obviously.
And that's the other thing is, out of all the coaches I've talked to and places I've been and things I continue to learn, the things I learned in those 3 years were pretty much things I continue to return to.
That's awesome.
And, everybody thinks there's something new and the grass is greener and all this other stuff. And it continues to come back to, jump, do an Olympic lift, squat, deadlift, press, pull, carry. You know,
It's pretty simple. Yeah. How you do those modalities and how you do them, obviously, is going to change. I mean, there's new equipment coming out, but I mean, I remember, you remember Dr. Pearson, Dave Pearson? So he worked at Ball State for a number of years. He and I had a discussion one time about when kettlebells first became popular again, probably like 2010, 2012. And he's like, I got all these kids coming to me saying how, hey, doc, you ever heard of kettlebells? And do you ever use them and stuff like that? And he's going, kettlebells have been around for like 100 years. They're not new by any stretch of imagination. The training form isn't new. I've noticed now, like if you look at trends on Instagram or TikTok, stuff like that, you see all these people, using Indian clubs and doing the club training. And that's like, like this isn't new. That's even older than kettlebell. So,
well, I mean,
yeah, they're just a little.
Yeah, because like I had, one of the firefighters I was working with this morning was asking me about kettlebells, and I think I've seen stuff dates back to Russian army was carrying those around, and they were kind of boxy looking.
Yeah.
And then the Indian maces and the Indian clubs, those go back even further, I don't know. Because I think I show people pictures of, your weight room and what it looks like. And I saw similarities when I went to Michigan and saw their weight room. I think everybody thinks that it's going to be this very elaborate setup with all these machines and all this stuff. And it comes down to, yeah, man, there's a really nice set of barbells and bumpers.
Yep.
Some dumbbells. What else are we doing?
Yeah. I don't have fancy equipment. Yeah, by any stretch. I think the most fancy thing we have is we have tendo units. And and even that, it's like tendo units they're not accurate by any stretch of imagination. And anybody who says they're accurate, like, be mindful of what you're saying. Now, what they could be is consistent,
right?
And consistency is probably more important than accuracy because nobody really knows what how many meters per second you're using under this load. Great, but as long as it consistently measures that, that's all that matters. Like that's the most important part, And so I can tell somebody, at 100 kilos, I need you to move at this many meters per second. And so that's probably the fanciest piece of equipment we have. But it's a necessity for me was because it took it off the coach's eye and your opinion and put it onto either you did or you didn't. Same thing with weightlifting. What I love about weightlifting, powerlifting, weightlifting, anything of that nature where it's like, okay, I need to squat 140 kilos. Did you do it? Yes? No. That's it. There's no, well, I kind of got it. I'm like, no, there's no kind of. You didn't. Yeah, so that's.
All right, so we're talking about, did you stand up with a weight or did you not stand up with 140 kilos?
That's it. Yeah, it's a cut and dry thing. And so it's a matter of like, with weightlifting and even with strength, period, like it's all a matter of did you or did you not? And so when we're looking at training, I'm a big fan of saying, say I want you to move this weight and I want you to move as fast as possible. Like that's so going back to the tendo units. Mm-hmm. I can simply say, I need you to move this many meters per second. If I'm just watching you move, I could be off by a lot. As far as my opinion goes, I could be off by a lot on what I think, how fast you're moving. And so I just needed something to measure the velocity or, a guesstimate velocity of what you're doing. As long as that guesstimate is consistent, that's all I really need.
Yeah. And that thing I really like, I remember, I want to say it was probably like 08, 09 maybe, when we were using some tendo units with some teams at Ball State was, basically, hey, you can do these sets at this velocity, but once you lose, 10% in 2 subsequent sets, we're going to cut it there or whatever. And that seemed to work very well because it removed a lot of arguing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Athletes trying to, argue their point. It's like, well, hey, did you do your best? Cool. Well, you've dropped off. Move on.
Yeah.
But I saw even on Twitter recently, some people were arguing about tendo units or, whatever other bar velocity measure tool you want to use. But one camp was saying, well, you don't want to use those because people can get out of position and they're just focusing on the speed. And I was like, okay, fine. But if you're a smart coach and you go about the sequencing appropriately, it should be a non-issue. They should be educated enough to know what to do and not do. But
yeah, and I again, it's only a tool. It's not something you have to rely on. It's okay, we're going for this objective. My objective today is about speed. I need you to move the barbell fast, or even I need you to go big effort. I need heavy, and so if you're moving a barbell at 0.9 meters per second, say we're just throwing this out there, clearly that isn't heavy. And it's a really fast illustration for me on a new athlete, younger athlete, to say, okay, I need you to be at around 0.45 to zero point 0.5. I want heavy. This is what we're going for. And once they start realizing what it takes to push them that slow, with big effort, obviously, once they realize that, I can take the tendos away. It's like, it's no longer well, that feels heavy. If you've never been around, I mean, it's like RPE. If you've never really worked out, then I say, hey, I need you to give me a 7.5. I'm like, what's a 7.5? What does that even mean? And so it's a easy way for me to get kids to understand, okay, this is what a heavy set feels like. This is what a heavy speed set feels like. This is what a speed set feels like. So this is definitely not one of those things where you have to have it on the bar all the time. And in fact, I don't use them year round. I'll use them for segments of training, and mostly in the beginning of the year, just to get kids to understand what I'm asking them, asking of them. And then you just take them away and then they can do it. But one thing I do like to bring you back to nuance is that athletes tend to be, they're not all, I'm not going to say all, not every, but tend to be extroverts. And they love that external stimulus of, did I do it or did I not do it? And the box doesn't lie. I didn't say the box was accurate, but I didn't say the box was inconsistent either. And so if I say I need you to move, you can move as much weight as you want. You just have to move it at this many meters per second. And so then all of a sudden you get that challenge, that feedback challenge of, oh, I think I could do more. I think I could do more. And so then, you find that 7.5 RPE, through them understanding how to push harder because they're seeing what they are or are not doing.
So you think they get better at that over the years from freshman to senior?
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So they're getting
to the point where you don't even have to use the tender units.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can say, hey, this is the effort level I'm looking for. And you usually get it pretty close.
Yeah. And that was a, another story I remember from early time of when I was in the weight room with you was, basketball team that was the basketball team at the time. The sport coach came through and said, just pointed to each guy and was like, well, this guy needs bigger shoulders, this guy needs bigger legs, no understanding of performance and what that means.
Yeah.
So can you break down how you view performance? Obviously, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but you're less concerned with aesthetics most likely, but what's your view on performance? How'd you define that, I guess?
Okay. Let me start with this. Having been a bodybuilder, I was a former bodybuilder. And in that time, so in high school and college, I ran, so my 40 time was around a 4.5, 4.45. Okay, so my fastest was 4.45. My average was 4.5. Easy. Any day of the week, jeans, didn't matter. I could run a 4.45. Then I became a bodybuilder, and all of a sudden that speed went to 4.7, and then 4.8, and then 4.9. I got bigger and bigger and bigger, but I didn't get any faster, Mm-hmm. And then after bodybuilding, I got back into weightlifting. I was a weightlifter in high school, got back into weightlifting, and then all of a sudden started watching those speeds come down and down and down. Coaches will come to you and they want kids to pass that eye test. They want kids to look a certain way, and it's the balance for me is, one, if they don't get what they're looking for, they're never going to trust me. That is the biggest reason why I now let kids bench press. I let kids do curls. I let kids do, a lot of bodybuilding type movements, as long as it's not taking away from the power, the strength, or the speed. And so for me, the matrix are, if we're running, how fast are you running? Are you improving your time? If you're jumping, how high are you jumping? Are you improving your vert? And I don't work with a lot of pure strength athletes, other than say my throwers. I have a couple throwers on the track team. Are your distances getting farther with your throws? And if they are, then great, we're on the right path. But if they're not, then we've got to reevaluate what we're doing. And so to quantify, and I think I know the answer you're looking for, and I'm not beating around the bush. I'm just simply, I'm letting you know that in the weight room, we have set up these matrices. You see max out bores, squat, bench, deadlift, even cleans. I love when coaches have cleans and snatch on there, stuff like that. But what I've seen is if you take 1,000 athletes and you improve all 1,000 by 10%, all their numbers, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a better athlete. Now, they have a stronger body, they have a faster body, they have a more powerful body, but until they start carrying that over to the sport they're playing, then it really doesn't matter. A kid that squats 500 pounds but still sits on the bench, what does that mean? What does that matter? And so for me, the matrix is actually how well they're performing on the court, or how well they're performing on the field, or how well they're performing. If I was working with rowing in the boat, it's a matter of my training is based off the response and the feedback I get from my athletes, and I will change my training based on that. If a kid comes to me and says, the men's volleyball, let's use that example right now. If a men's volleyball player comes to me and says, God, I just don't feel like I'm getting off the ground fast. Like I know my 1 rep max is high, my 1 rep vert is high, but in a match or in practice, I just don't feel like I'm getting very high. Like, okay, then I need to change how many times you can jump and how many times you can jump well. Does that make sense? And so instead of looking at just their max jump, I need to change how their repeatability, so their work capacity of jumping. And so I will change my training based on that. Now, if I were just looking at their vert, and I got a kid that touches 12 feet, I would look at that kid and say, no, you're touching 12 feet. Obviously your jump is good. But his average vert, if I were to look at that and all of a sudden it's 11.6, that's not close. That's not even remotely close. When you're in a sport of volleyball where, guys are averaging, 11.8, 11.9, and all of a sudden you're only jumping 11.6 in games, that's a detriment to your ability to play. And so I really listen to feedback from my athletes and try to curtail my training towards that. Now, obviously, I've taken a grain of salt. There's kids that just do not like the weight room, and they will always tell you that the weight room is hurting them. But then you have to wait for the results. I've had several track kids. I love them to death, but I've had several track kids who will say, "Oh, my legs just feel heavy and sore." And this is in the fall, and of course they're going to feel that way. Then when I start backing down training, backing off volume, not intensity. The intensity is pretty much high year round. When I start backing off the volume, and their numbers start coming down, their sprint times start coming down, you are clearly doing better. You can't. You have to take your opinion of the weight room out of the question, because you are clearly running faster than you were, and so I'm able to help you produce more force to get down the track. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So that, kind of leading into something that's very popular right now that's been getting a lot of attention is monitoring fatigue. How do you know how to adjust up, how to adjust down? And you'll see a lot of people doing the reactive strength index, vertical jump. Like we're very, with the population I work with, which is all tactical, I see 60 new bodies every 6 months. So it's not as practical as I would like it to be, as far as like, hey, let's everybody assess your vert with a just jump mat. But with certain populations, guys who are trying to do special assignments or whatever, will get very in the weeds of using a just jump mat to monitor their fatigue day to day, week to week, and adjust up or down. But anyway, what are you using to make your adjustments?
Coach Harrison does actually do that with her teams, mostly her smaller teams, so women's volleyball and I think dive. But when you have a team like softball walking, you have 30 plus athletes to walk through the room, taking 6 just jump mats and having each kid do 3 jumps so you can get an average. Right. That's half your day, half your workout day. So you've just lost a workout day. So we don't do a lot of teams like that. God, as much as I'd like to say that I'm doing it on a regular basis, because I can definitely see the benefits of it. The issue comes from the fact that, one, we have very limited time. I may only have 2 hours. My swim team, I have 2 hours a week. And if I take a half hour out of each workout, I have 1 hour a week to actually get them stronger and produce more force, more power. So I don't do any monitoring of that nature. If I had more time, I would open that up. And because I don't think it's a bad idea, I think it's a great idea. But I think with the time allotment that I have, I really have got to be mindful of that. What I do is I talk to my athletes. I ask them questions. I engage with them to find out, how are you feeling? How are the numbers going? I'm constantly monitoring performance. So with my track kids, I'm always looking up their times. Are their times dropping? Are their times getting slower? Are they stagnated? And if I see a kid that's getting slower, then I talk to them. Hey, how are you feeling? Do you feel overwhelmed? Volleyball, same thing. I'm always asking, how are you feeling? How are things going for you? If they're going really well, then great, we can continue. If they're feeling sluggish or feeling like they're not moving well, then I'll back down on some of the volume. Again, I try to keep intensity relatively high. But with a sport like swimming, so swimming they do a true taper. The coach I work with does a true taper, and so it's about burying them. Like you've got to push them into that deficit in order to get that super compensation. And so these kids come to me, and all this week we taper in about 2 weeks. And so every day this past week, it's, oh my God, my legs feel like death. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, they're going to, and for the next 2 weeks, they're going to feel worse and worse. But I promise you, 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, if you're a 2-week taper person, 4 weeks from now, you're going to feel like $1,000,000. You're going to feel absolutely amazing. And so bear with me, eat and sleep, which brings me to the reason why it's a hard time adjusting workouts based on how athletes feel versus doing, even if you did adjust a matrix of looking at monitoring their vertical jump. I cannot monitor and or keep track of their sleep and eating. I can ask them and I can talk to them about doing it, but I can't go to the dorms or go to their apartment and say, hey, it's 10 o'clock. You got to go to bed. I need you to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and until we can do that, then all those things, it'll end up being, me cutting all of my training back to these 2 essential exercises, and then how much am I leaving on the table by doing that? And so sometimes like you kind of have to just bite down and push through things and really talk to athletes about, hey, sleep is really, really important. Like, I know you're in college. I know you're in this, twilight zone of I can party and I can go to class and I can play sports and I can do all these things and I feel invincible, but you're not. The body is going to break down. Something's going to give, and so if you're not eating right and you're not sleeping well, you're taking away from your performance, and I know it feels like the weight room's taking away from performance because you feel sore when you leave the weight room, but the reality is if I weren't causing this stimulus, then you wouldn't recoup in the long run. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of self-righteous, didn't it?
No, you're
my job's so important, that's not my intention. My intention was to say that they need the stimulus in order to continue growing and getting stronger and getting more and producing more power. But it's one of those things where there's so many variables out there that I wish we could control for, but we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, so when you're referring to intensity, and you're saying it's staying high year round, or are you talking above 80%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I stay between 80 and 90%. Every once in a while, we'll push to above 90, but I really try to keep my intensity between 80 and 90% for all my sports, for all my athletes. I will do a weekly undulation of say around an important event or important match or game or something like that. We may back down a little bit for that, but I would rather curtail the volume versus curtailing the intensity. So I'd rather you come in and do 3 sets of 80, 85% as fast and as hard as you can versus going light, but still doing, lots of reps.
Yeah.
Did they get anything out of it? Like, the one thing I can control is that connection of force and speed.
Yeah. And that's one thing that, when I talk with folks about training and, what sets and reps should look like, and total tonnage and like all this stuff, is, I remember seeing a lot on whiteboards for athletes at Ball State. It would not be uncommon to see, hey, we're going to do cleans for 15 sets of one, and people who have no background in training from either a coaching or a participant standpoint are going to say, holy shit, 15 sets, but we're only talking 15 reps.
Yeah.
as opposed to doing 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 3 each one of those is going to produce a different adaptation. And, another thing would be common to see anywhere from 3 to 10 sets of 1 to 3 reps on squats or deadlifts with dropping at the top or whatever. But a lot of people just don't have the appropriate frame of what good training should look like. So, so now we're talking about, we've defined training a little bit, talked about intensity, you're talking above 80 to 90%. And then the volume, undulating the volume there. I remember having a discussion with you one time about volume within a session. And you said, well, 100 total reps within a training session is a lot. So that might,
a lot, especially the way I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Might be considered, you should be fatigued following that type of session. So when you say you're changing volumes throughout the week, how does that look? I mean, are you talking 30 total reps on a low volume day, 100 reps on a high volume day? How do you adjust that?
All right. So since you've left, I've changed a few things. My workouts now look like this. You walk in the room. The first thing you do is movement prep. So right now I'm really trying to get kids to move their feet. I worked with a golfer. She was on the Ball State staff 2 years ago. Actually, a team 2 years ago. We were doing something, and I just had her take her shoes off to do it. I just wanted to show her how her feet move, and she had zero ability to move her toes. Like she could not mentally move her toes. If I said, move any of your toes, I just need something. She's like, I cannot move my feet. I'm like, oh, that seems really bad. How can you adjust to the ground and swing a golf club at however many degrees of rotation per second when you can't balance perfectly on the ground by adjusting your foot?
She a good golfer?
So she actually was a pretty good golfer. So it was mind blowing that she actually had the ability to do that. So my movement prep for all of my teams, until I see that the individual athlete becomes really good at it. My movement prep right now, ankle mobility, foot mobility. So we start with that. Then we go to hip mobility, hip and knee mobility. So those are the first 3 or 4 things that we do with our athletes. Then I will do a power prep phase. So that's anything from like a box jump to jump rope, anything that just, depending on what I'm doing that day, I'm really trying to get just I'm trying to get the nervous system really prepped for a heavy exercise. And then we'll come over to do cleans. I generally like cleans as my first exercise. And I know there's a lot of coaches out there like, you shouldn't use the cleans. That's a sport. That's not a exercise.
You better be doing trap bar jump shrugs and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually not against those. My swim team, Dan Cole and Chase, actually, we had a conversation a few years ago, actually. I was just taking over the swim team, and I knew that at the time, the swim coach was very anti-clean. Apparently, he had a kid get hurt before I took him over, and so he was like, no clean. I was like, okay, fine. And I was asking Cole, Dan, and Chase about, what can I do? And Dan brought up, he was like, why don't you start using trap bar jumps with the athletes? I was like, oh, it's a really good idea. So I gave them the option. You can either do cleans or trap bar jumps. I talked the coach into doing cleans, by the way. You can do cleans or trap bar jumps. And it was funny. The first month, I bet I had 60-40 trap bar jumps to cleans. The second month, it was about 50-50. The third month, it was about 80-20. And then it was somewhere around the third or fourth month that all of a sudden I only had 2 or 3 athletes that were using trap bar jumps.
Yeah.
I can still think of it today. Almost all of them have switched over to cleans. And so, and what the kids are telling me is that they're faster off the blocks and faster off the walls. I'm like, that's why we do them. That's the only reason why we do them. And so again, I go back to that. That's my third movement is cleans. I love doing cleans. I like snatches, but the loads are higher in cleans, and so I can push the body harder. So we'll do cleans, and then we will do our heavy, slow exercise, deadlifts, squats, things like that. Lunges. If I'm doing split isolateral type exercises or split squats like that. But I do that in that way because I've decided that we have all these accessory exercises that we do. We try to fill this hour. And my thought was, when I saw that young golfer, was why am I not taking time to work on their ability to articulate their body, to use their body? My men's golf team or men's volleyball team, they do the footwork, but they also do a lot of scat mobility. Their glenoid femoral rhythm was not nearly what I thought it would be for an athlete that swings their arm as fast as they do. Right. And so we do a lot of scat mobility, getting these kids to protract, retract, elevate, depress, has taken me months and months and months to do. And so we put all of that in there. And so I actually spend probably half my workout on just mobility and getting them to understand how to move their body well. So we do all of that prior to lifting heavy. So by the time it comes down to it, I've only got time for 3 hard exercises: cleans, a lower body strength exercises, an upper body strength exercise, and then maybe some, if they have, so like let's see. So my volleyball guys will do a lot of shoulder. My swimmers will do a lot of shoulder. So scat stability, beyond the mobility stuff. So then my strength work for the scap and glenoid fossa, a glenoid femoral joint, is at the end of the work. I haven't finished with that, and so I don't do nearly as many accessory exercises as I used to. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the total volume, so getting back to your question, sorry, that's a very long.
No, that's good. I like that.
The actual amount of work I do is probably half of what you remember.
Okay.
And so a heavy day, so high intensity, high volume day, which is rare, is still only maybe 50 reps total on the day.
Yeah.
And so it's not a ton of volume. And so I'll tail that back to like 30 total reps of heavy, hard stuff, like above 80%. And that's how I do my undulations right there. So now you can see why with as little volume as I'm giving them. And so I don't really need to cut back on the intensity because I don't do that much that I'm burying them. I know a lot of coaches, they do deload weeks. I don't do enough volume to necessarily need a deload week. I will listen to my athletes. So if my athletes come to me and say, man, I am just buried, and they're not a swimmer. Yep. So if my volleyball players come to me and tell me they're buried, I'm like, okay, we can do a few different exercises to lay off that to get your body feeling good again. But as soon as you're feeling good, we're going to get right back into it. Simply because I don't do enough volume. I am, if I had to describe it, I would say I'm just above minimal effective dose. And what I find, I'll be the first to admit that I know there's some people out there that are like, oh, you're not getting anything out of minimal effective dose. I'm like, but I also don't hurt anybody. I can't control their sleep. I can't control their eating, and I cannot control how much partying they're doing. Mm-hmm. If you got kids that are out there drinking their brains out, and then not sleeping and not eating, they're an injury waiting to happen. And so if I push minimal effective dose, what I see every single year in, year out, is consistent improvement in all of my athletes, and I see minimal injuries in all my athletes. And so how am I doing a bad job? I get it. I'm not making the best. You're absolutely right. I'm not making the best. But they're better today than they were yesterday, and they'll be better tomorrow than they were today. And so I feel like I'm doing my job quite well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the second word there says it all, right? Effective. So how much above effective do you need to go? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
But yeah, there was last time I was back at Ball State, I guess last year.
Yeah.
Almost a year. Yeah.
Was it a year ago? I don't know. Past 2 or 3 months ago.
Shit, I don't know. But, you took me through a few things that I had questions about. And one of them was the Hatfield split squat with a floating heel. And you're telling me about how you're having your track kids do that and cleans. And that's effectively like the bulk of their training right now.
Oh, it's almost it. Yeah.
and they're crushing PRs on a regular basis. So I remember my legs had not been that sore in a while. So I brought that one back to Washington with me, and I've had some guys doing it, and they're reporting the same thing. I mean, like, their ankle mobility is improving. They're getting a new stimuli that they've never felt before, and they're feeling better. And I don't know, it's just interesting because you see all this crap that gets pushed around on social media, and everybody wants to try all this new stuff. And really, it comes back to not being too far removed from the basics and getting really, really good at the basics and their close derivatives.
Yeah.
So
push something, pull something, pick up something heavy, move something fast. Yeah.
Well, I remember that's another combo that I remember as, I came up to you when I was like probably a sophomore or something, and I was, hey, what do you think of this training and blah, 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 blah. And you cut me off and you're like, well, does it have a press in there? Does it have a pulling movement? Does it have a squat? Yes, yes, and yes. Okay, it sounds like a great training program. That was before we even talked about like sets, reps, intensity, and all that stuff. It's like, that's the point.
Well, I mean, that's the point. Yes. Go. Sorry.
No. It's just, that's the point. It's like you have the basic things you need and do them well. And
yeah.
I don't know. But that was the other thing. And you and I were talking about was changing ranges of motion in season or out of season. And I think you're doing that more with basketball right now, right?
So I don't work with basketball anymore, but I know what you're saying. Okay. So I've had this conversation. I remember having a Cole, and Cole gave me a look of absolute idiocy. Like he thought I was a giant idiot. I'm not saying that you should never go full range of motion. I am clearly an advocate for full range of motion. I've always been. I will always be an advocate for full range of motion. What I was saying, and what I am continuing to say is, so if I took a full squat, for me, a full squat is where your hamstrings cover your calves, so you're going as full range of motion as possible. My full squat versus my quarter squat isn't even close to each other. Like what I can do a quarter squat at, what I can full squat isn't even remotely close to each other. But I don't play sports at my full squat position. I play sports in my quarter squat position. And then someone will say, you don't play sports at all, old man. You're right. But athletes don't play sports at their full squat position. Athletes play sports at their quarter squat position. So shouldn't we train both? Like, shouldn't we optimally train their quarter squat as well as we train their full squat? And what I saw was that's where I was using the Hatfield split squat is you're never going to get down to a full 90-degree hip and knee angle on that. You're going to be somewhere slightly above that. By doing that, now I'm actually making the range of motion that they play sports at as strong as it can be, or closer to as strong as it can be. And, that seems to just make sense to me. Like if I'm only doing full squats, am I leaving something on the table? Am I leaving ability untouched or untapped? And so that's where I started saying that I don't think we need to train full squat year round, or even if we do, use the full squat as a mobility aspect of their training, and then the quarter squat as their actual strength training. Especially during in-season times. I've also reported, I've had kids report far less deep muscular soreness when we're doing quarter squats. They come back and go, I feel more powerful. I feel like I'm stronger. I feel like I'm pushing better, but I just don't have that deep muscle soreness, that bodybuilding, I'm air quoting, bodybuilding muscle soreness, and to me, that's a positive. Like, wouldn't you agree? Is that a positive?
Yeah. From a fatigue standpoint, I was listening to Dr. Mike Israetel a few weeks back on, one of the thousands of podcasts he's been on or whatever, but he's talking about stimulus to fatigue ratios. And you have to look at, yes, something may be very stimulating, but at the same time, it may be very fatiguing to the system. So you have to take that into consideration. So with taller athletes, especially, like if you're talking about volleyball or men's basketball or whatever, how much distance do they have to cover in a squat versus, a 5'6" Olympic lifter,
Yeah.
It's a totally different ball game. So
us little guys with T-Rex arms and T-Rex legs, we're fine. We're never, like it's easy for us. But yeah, I work with guys that are 6'9", and it's not that they can't squat to full depth. They just don't do it. Like if I'm not doing something and I'm going to rest, I actually sometimes just sit in a full squat just to watch my athletes. I'll sit on the, sit and watch a clean, or sit there and watch if I'm looking for depth, I'll sit down and watch a squat. That's a natural resting position for somebody my size, my shortness, my height. Sorry. And so those guys would never do that. None of my volleyball players would ever rest in a full squat. They're going to try to find something tall to sit on. Now, and so I do use the full squat for dynamic range of motion. And so we'll do like a goblet squat or a counterbalance squat, usually those guys, because they don't have a lot of great proprioceptiveness at the bottom of their squat. But the more times I do it, the better they'll get. But I don't spend all of my time loading the bottom of the squat. I just don't, and I have found that my kids are getting better. They're jumping better. They're feeling better. They're moving better. And so until somebody can point out, like, here's your shortcoming and here's what you're not doing for your athletes, and be accurate about it. Like, people can say it all the time. Hell, I used to say it. I mean, I know when you were in the room, I was a full squat or nothing person.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember. It would have been like, so me and Cole kind of went through about the same time. And I remember him and I, like, it was our first month or 2 months with you maybe. And there was men's basketballs in there squatting, and, we didn't know what to look for. And you looked at me and you're like, did that dude hit full depth? I'm like, I don't know. And then you looked and asked Cole, did this guy on this end hit full depth? And he's like, I don't know, but I mean, that's an example of how young we were as far as like knowing what to look for, what qualifies to be a full squat. And then now looking at like tall guys, for example, there's a guy I'm training right now who's 6'8". He played professional basketball on multiple continents, and to get him to squat, I still use things that I learned early where, hey, we're going to use a post and you're going to use your hands to walk you down into a depth. And you're going to sit and hold that for a minute. And for him, it's a nightmare to squat. Right now, he's front squatting 95 pounds, and I know he hates it, but it's necessary for his current situation. But anyway, versus like the guy who trains directly across from him is 5'5", 5'6", and he can front squat, or he can back squat 275, no problem. But it's a whole different animal,
Yeah.
So,
but like you said, you still get him to go through full range of motion. So you're utilizing full ability of the joints, which is awesome. I think that's amazing. But when it comes to performance, when it comes to life, we rarely do life at the full spectrum of our joint mobility. And so you should have that available to you. But I don't think you have to maximally train it all the time.
Right. Yeah, you can vary the ranges, vary the load, how you load it, etc. And that was another thing that I wanted to touch on, was the amount of focus you give nervous system. When athletes come in, is I still use things with guys as far as not just jumping, but I look at their eyes. What are their eyes telling me? What are their palms saying? Are they excited to train? Are they not excited to train? Things like that as far as readiness goes for the session. Now, is that something you're still doing with your athletes as soon as they come in, trying to get an idea and gauge on?
I do. I try to engage with all my athletes. They probably wonder why I talk to, I try to get around and talk to everybody as they walk in the room. They're like, why is he so concerned with this? But it's a matter of just getting close enough. I can see their eyes, see their pupils, see what's going on. How facilitated are you? And it depends on the workout. If we're just doing, we'll do a lot of yoga in season. We'll do a lot of really good mobility yoga in season, getting these kids moving as well as possible. For those, I'm not really as concerned about it. But when we're coming in, we're doing 80+% on a clean and a back squat that day, or clean and a deadlift that day. I'm like, you need to be facilitated. You need to be ready to go. Do I need to have all the lights turned back on? Do I have to have the music up a little bit more? Like, what do I need to do to get your body dialed in and ready to go, or your mental state dialed in, ready to go? And so, yeah, I still do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a change I've made here is, we've got the facility that I'm at, we've got 13,000 square feet. And
wow, nice.
It's whoever did the layout, did not lay it out understanding how performance should be laid out. It's so 13,000 square feet, there's 10 racks.
Oh, wow.
So that gives you an idea of there's a lot of open floor space, and then probably half of that space, half of the 13 is covered by machines and cardio pieces and stuff like that. But anyway, there's these very, very bright lights that are just absurd LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first changes I made was, hey, we're going to kill the lights every day, because we've got skylights that come in through the side. So it appears to be kind of like dark dungeon-like, but we're just going with the natural rhythm of the sun,
Oh, perfect.
So that'll lighten it. But what's been reported back to me is people hate the lights when they're on because they're just so overstimulating.
Mm-hmm.
So that can actually lead to, fatigue and things of that nature. So then when I turn them off, guys are like, oh, thank God, I can perform,
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage guys to get these, these glasses are just blue light filters to help with, neurological fatigue and stimulation and all that stuff. But it's all this little stuff that people don't realize it affects them that adds up.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing. Yeah. But you're dead on. I honestly think you're dead on. There's so many minute details that if you can't control for, it's not that training's useless or like that, but I mean, there is a lot more to training than just picking something up and putting it down, and for the longest time, that was my philosophy. Let's just get stronger. Let's get stronger. And I'm never going to say that stronger is bad. I've never said it. I don't think I've ever heard an athlete. If I have, please tell me. I don't think I've ever heard an athlete say, "Hey, coach, I am just too strong for this sport." I've never had that. And so, I'm not. It's not that I'm about not getting stronger, but I mean, there's so many other things that help kids get better, like what you just talked about. If they can train in a state where they're not at the peak of their sympathetic nervous system, then they're not just mentally exhausted at the end of it. Maybe they can get more work out of it. Maybe they can, their cortisol levels aren't, jack the roof all the time. Cortisol is a great thing for the body, but not all the time, and with the amount of caffeine and the little amount of sleep the kids get, and and one of the things that I like in the room, but I don't like in the room is the music. Like, it's always on 13, always on 13. And so I like that you like
just constant.
It's just so, and for them, it's fine. But what they don't realize is that, Coach Harris and myself and Coach Labrador are in that room all day with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for what they get for an hour, that's 9 hours a day for me, and so it's that's got to push your cortisol levels to the roof. And so it's just a matter of, utilizing what's available to do it, to get them to be as best as possible can. And for you, that was turning the lights off and actually using natural sunlight. For us, we turn half the lights off, most of the time. The only time we turn them all on is if a coach comes in and they're like, oh, why are the lights turned off? Turn them on. So we'll let the coach turn them on because that's what they desire. But usually after that coach leaves, we might turn them right back off and just have half the lights on again. You probably remember in the office, the lights are rarely on in the office. They're almost always off. There's enough ambient light coming into the window that we don't need specific office lights, but there's also time we just got to get out of those lights and just be in a dimmer air environment, to bring our bodies and our minds back down, for getting ready for that next training session.
Yeah. And that's another thing we do is, with talking about the music and whatnot is we just have one big speaker, and we'll play music, whatever. I don't care for the training session. But then towards the end of the training session, when everybody's done heavy lifting, we'll turn on Incubus or something like that, Pearl Jam, like something where we're just going to bring it down. And I'll explain to them up front so they know what the hell's going on. It's fine to have that like spiked up and stuff, but we also need to come down out of that. So we'll listen to Incubus and do some breathing to try to get in a parasympathetic state. But
that's a wonderful idea. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna steal that from you.
So it's those are some things that we'll do with it. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that I remember. I don't remember a ton of yelling and screaming prior to a lift or people getting all like, hey, slap me in the face. Like, it was never that. It was, hey, this dude's going to go over here and, front squat 140 kilos and he's going to do whatever he needs to do mentally, but then he'll come back and hang out for a minute and then go back and do it again. So was that
by design?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, my mentors, Jim and Mike, neither one of them were yellers. How do I put this gently? I was not always the brightest himself, still not the brightest athlete. And so I got yelled at and cussed out and screamed at a lot. I remember I remember coming into the locker room after practice one day, football practice from high school, and the freshmen were taking bets on the number of times I got yelled at in a practice. Like, that's how often I got yelled at, screamed at in practice. And so I'm not saying that you can't take it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can't be yelled at and still be productive and all that. I mean, clearly in the past it has. But what I have found is I enjoy being in that environment. I love the weight room. I loved sports. I loved football. I loved wrestling. I enjoyed being in that environment. But what if I had hated it?
Mm-hmm.
And then now you have someone yell at you and scream at you and cussing at you every single day. Every time you come in, this person is 6 inches deep in your bottom. And so I decided that I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be that rah, yelling and screaming, coach every single rep type person. I want to be a coach where you walk in the room, we have a conversation. Now, obviously, if the music is loud, I have to speak loudly so you can hear me over the music. But I'm never yelling and screaming at an athlete or even at a team. I want them to understand that, hey, come on in, let's get warm, let's get our body facilitated, let's get ready to go, and let's get the work done at hand. If I do happen to raise my voice, this is something that Mandy has always made fun of me for. She's like, you can look angry and pissed off for 1 second and literally turn around, like literally just look the other way, and you got a smile on your face and you're back to normal. I'm like, yeah, because I'm not actually mad about anything. You just have to, you got to get over the music, and then you have to get them to understand, that now is the moment. Now is the moment of intensity, and then it's time to come back down. Once it's over, it's over.
Right.
There were a few athletes that we've slapped up, but it was always at their request. It was never, this is our process. This is always, hey, Coach Robe, can you get me fired up? I'm like, oh, all right, here we go. Let's see what happens.
I've been saving this for.
Yeah, I've been saving this one up. And we understand the sympathetic nervous system as far as like pain is a great way to get the body to really excite itself. It's not the intention of hurting someone. It's the intention of just a sting, same thing with loud music, same thing with lights. You can do it all through varying processes. But, when an athlete asks me, say, hey, just, give me a hard smack on the back just to get my sympathetic nervous system really, really turned on. Like, all right, I understand why they're asking it. But I also understand that you need to come down from that right afterwards. I don't want you at that elevated state for the whole hour. I need you there for just 2 or 3 minutes and then come down off of that. That's something that's really hard to get people to understand, is that they think that method's effective every single time you do it. And it has a what's called a declining trend. The more you do it, the less your body becomes, or the more your body becomes adapted to it, and the less you get the response from it. So it's something that if you're going to yell and scream, do it sparingly. Do it just enough to really cause the response that you're looking for. Really get the athlete to their heart rate goes up, their pulse goes up, their breathing rate goes up just for a few minutes, just to do something and then bring them back down.
Right. Yeah, they become desensitized to that stuff. And that's what I've noticed is the athletes that I've never been much of like a scream yell guy, but like I've had my few moments where I just flip shit because people aren't listening, and it's like, we covered this at the beginning of the session, man. Like, why are you and I think I only remember like less than a handful of times where you flipped out, but it was more of both times that I remember was men's basketball.
Yeah.
And then I think the third time would have been like men's swimming. They were being jerks to like some admin people, and some people who like did janitorial type work. So I mean, like, they deserved it, right? Like, but I mean, it was those. Anyway, I see some of these guys who they think that's an effective method, and it's like, well, what's going to happen when it comes time to perform and that's not available?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, like for the guys I'm with, like, tactical dudes, they're not going to be out in the field or whatever and be like, hold on, let me put on my music real quick. And like, I got to do all my prep. Like, that's not going to happen,
Hold on, that guy. I got to get pumped up here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, as far as like recovery and whatnot, what are you guys focusing? I know you said, yoga and things like that, but have you changed anything there with athletes? Is there anything you're emphasizing or paying more attention to now?
We really try to push nutrition. We now have the fueling station up and running. It's going really well. We've got great grad students out of the dietetics program running it. Matt Korn right now is our guy, and this guy he's going to go places. He does a really phenomenal job for us. So nutrition is probably one of the biggest things. Like that's the low hanging fruit that everybody has access to. I'd love kids to get into breathing. I'd love kids to get into daily yoga. I mean, you were with me when you've probably heard me profess this. Yoga is not exercise. You ever hear me say that?
Oh yeah.
Oh God, I used to say all the time. And again, like I said, I'm an idiot, and I know I'm an idiot, but at least I'm a learning idiot. I'm an idiot that's willing to accept when I'm wrong about something and move forward on it. Now I truly understand, and I think with that, I've always had great mobility. I've always, I've never had an issue with any kind of mobility test, any kind of joint range of motion. I've always had great, through all that. And so that could be the reason why I thought yoga was crap. Now at 46 years old, I look at yoga and go, holy crap, you should do at least 10 to 20 minutes every single day. Your body will thank you. You will love yourself so much more. And some of that is meditation. Part of the yoga process is meditation. Some of that yoga is breathing process. I think Andrew Huberman, you ever listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I've started listening to more of his stuff.
So I think Huberman just put out a podcast a few weeks ago that talked about how there were some studies done on the breathing process during. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I read a synopsis that the breathing process during meditation was found to be as good as the meditation alone. So if you just did the breathing and then just did meditation, that the breathing process was actually as good as doing like the whole process. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so those are things that I would love to get into with my athletes. I would love to get better at with myself, like become more, more knowledgeable of.
All right. So little earbuds died on you there, but you're saying with yoga, even 10 minutes is, something you're trying to encourage the athletes to do daily, right?
Yeah, I really do. I ask them to set up a routine that they can do either before bed or in the morning. Get your body moving. And I'm not, there's a lot of different types of yoga out there, and everybody's very particular on their, the ones they like. That's not my point. My point is movement. Get your body moving. With athletes, you do all these abrupt movements and then stop. Mm-hmm. And so get those joints opened up again. Get them moving. Get them doing new stuff. I am slowly recanting all of the BS I've ever said about yoga. and admitting that it should be a huge part of your training program. I still don't call it exercise. Like people that just do yoga, I really think they should add strength training in it as well. You don't know the difference between, a person that can squat 200 kilos and can do, give me a tough yoga pose, is going to be far better than a person that can do a really tough yoga pose, but they have no strength. Like they can produce no power. Does that make sense? And so I do think they need to be married together, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And so, yeah, I ask my athletes to do yoga, but the one thing that we focus on with them is the nutrition aspect, getting to eat, getting calories in yourself. So we get Gatorade products donated to us through Pepsi because Ball State's a Pepsi school. But I would rather have things that have more fiber, that have more vitamin and mineral profile, better vitamin and mineral profile, and so we go buy fruit, we go buy dried fruit, we go to Costco and buy things that we think have those things in there, and that's what's great about having the dietitian as well. They can give us that feedback of, this is good, this is better. Like, well, let's get better. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I'm trying to get the nutrition piece added to our facility, because we've got a storage room, and money is not as much of a factor. It's just proper allocation of those monies. But trying to explain to the administration, like, for some of these guys, this may be the only meal opportunity they have for vitamins, minerals, nutrients that are, like you take a college kid, the rest of their food may be pizza and beer, depending on the night,
Every kid, yeah.
So
sure.
Really trying to get that addressed. But I'm going to hear my dog flip out here in a second. Hang on. Yeah, I think wife and kiddos are just getting home. Okay. But yeah, so we're trying to get the nutrition piece. We're trying to get, I would like to see supplementation of, they come in and they get their intra workout nutrition that is enhanced with vitamins, minerals, turmeric, things like that. But yeah, it's coming on down the pipe. It's just taking a minute.
Hey, as long as it keeps coming. What else do you do as far as recovery goes? Like, what are the kind of things? I know that you are really pushing yourself knowledge-wise, and you're out there talking to a lot of people and reading a lot of books and listening to a lot of podcasts. What kind of things are you doing? What kind of things are you looking for recovery, for training, things like that?
Yeah, I read a book a couple months back called Breath by James Nestor.
Good book.
Yeah, that was good. Another book called What Doesn't Kill Us, and that gets into the Wim Hof stuff, cold exposure, breathing, etc. But I mean, from a recovery standpoint, we have every modality we could ever use. And I just tell the guys, like, hey, try all of it, see what you respond to. And we've got cupping set, like, regardless of anybody's opinion on it, it's more important is, like, I mean, like, even at Ball State, like when you guys had that big vibrating plate, like, some people swore by the vibrating plate and other people are like, that's a $20,000 piece of shit.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what the science says on it. It matters what the athlete thinks about it. So, I've got a couple scraping tools. It's not Graston, but it's similar. So I'll scrape some guys. We'll do cupping. The PT I work with can do dry needling if he thinks it's appropriate. And then we've got these hyper ices that will do heat and vibration. We've got other tools that will do simply vibration, the Normatex, all, just all the stuff that everybody else has at a big institution or whatever. But we have, and we set aside time for recovery. So I have the luxury of time with my guys where collegiate has constraints. I can simply go to the people in charge and say, hey, can I get another hour, and say no problem.
Yeah.
So
That'd be nice.
that's, and I'd really like to have our sauna work, and I'd really like to get a cold tub, and then we could do true contrast. But
okay, let's go in. I actually do want to ask you about the vibrating stuff too, because we have the hyper ice, the rollers, and the massage guns.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. But first, let's talk about the ice baths and the contrast bathing. So heat and ice. When would you use that? Like, you don't want to use it right after training, do you? Like the ice?
No, because that's going to blunt the hypertrophy effect, right? Yeah. So what we're trying to figure out what's going to work best for our guys as far as training goes, and what I've explained to them is like a point system. So the point system from Bondarchuk and Ishurin, where they've got a 1 through 5 point scale. So every training session is either going to be restoration, retention, or development. So a restoration is going to be a 1, a retention is going to be a grade 2, and then any type of development, depending on the degree of development you do, is going to be a 3, 4, or 5. So I'll explain to guys, hey, we're going to do, I want you guys to use up between 15 and 20 points within a week. So, and I'll give some rules there of those. You may not have back-to-back 5-point days. If you do a 5-point session, it must be separated by greater than 72 hours, because that's straight out of the freaking book of what to do or not to do. So if we have a week where it's, max development of a 5 on a Monday, max development of a 5 on a Friday, then Wednesday is going to be a restoration type day. So that whole day may be recovery modalities and contrast and things of that nature, because they'll still have Thursday to recover from, if that recovery modality did in fact beat them up. So that's kind of how we'll go about it. But it's a lot of trial by fire. Nothing's perfect, and it's going to have to be dependent on that athlete.
How are you basing their recovery? Are you in HRB? What are you doing for recovery to monitor?
Man, I would love to have like some polar chest straps. So when I got there, the amount of shit that we have that's like just sitting around. No joke. We have some bald force plates that are $20,000 bald force plates that are just sitting in my office, haven't been used yet. Really? I've got a bald rep who's going to come out here and walk me through everything. But that's what I'm talking about. It's just great. So anyway, prior to me arriving, there was Whoop. Yep. So all these guys had Whoop bracelets, and I don't think they understood data collection, but I don't think they understood the interpretation of the data. Mm-hmm. So then it came end of the year, and Whoop was like, okay, well, if you want to re-up, it's going to be, $30,000 for the year, or whatever the fee came out to be. And, the admin kind of looked at that and was like, I don't know about that. So nobody's used a wearable since. But down at Special Warfare Development, they have these gigantic television screens. So when they go to do like a conditioning day, for example, they all have these chest straps they'll put on, and then that chest strap will correspond to a TV, and that screen, the TV screen, will turn red, yellow, or green.
Okay. So I've seen those. Yeah.
So depending on
SimAware or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. So depending on what's going on with the athlete, they may say, okay, what screen you're on, keep whatever you do in the yellow, or keep whatever you do in the green. And if it starts changing colors, then you need to adjust accordingly. I would love to get into the weeds on some of that, and do that with those guys as far as fatigue management goes. But anyway, super long-winded way just to answer your question. But the things that I've found that work best is just a good old-fashioned journal. And, when you wake up in the morning, immediately, like if you think of it, put that beside your bed, immediately check your heart rate. What's the heart rate looking like day to day? And if we see a great variance in that one way or another, we know something's going on. Hang on just a second. Oh, that's great. Okay, hold on. So that'll allow for us to say, all right, if we see a great variance, like your waking heart rate is 45 or whatever, and you wake up one day and it's 75. Okay, what the hell changed to make it jump 30 beats? So we'll do that. Another thing is I used to have some throwers when I was coaching at another university. We'd take phone here and we'd do a tap test. They're free. The tap test variations you can download, and we'd just have them tap their finger, and then it would do a 5-second collection, and then take an average of three data collections. So then it would spit out an average. You got 52, 49, 53, or whatever. So then that average. So then over time, it becomes increasingly accurate and measures nervous system preparation. But I think that came from super training. But they used to do it with a space bar, or like doing period, like touching the period button or whatever.
Yep.
So those two are the things that I'll use with guys. And then frankly, the third thing is just talking to them about like, hey, are you excited to be here today? Do you want to train? How's your life? Like all that shit. Because that's, that PARS form, the physical activity and readiness score is huge. And then just what do you use to ask questions? Like, what's your gauge? So, but yeah, to answer your question, I guess there's no wearable that we use right now. And I think Galpin even goes into the wearables are highly, highly variable. So even this watch right here, this thing, I was doing a Stairmaster the other day for half an hour and it said my heart was at 88 beats a minute. And, I'm not in that good a shape. There's no way. So,
yeah, understood. And the more we use that type of equipment, the better the equipment's going to get. People are going to try to refine it and make it better. So I agree with what Dr. Galpin says about, hey, you really need to know your body and listen to your body and do those things. Don't just rely on the wearables as far as your training goes. Sometimes you got to push through it when you feel like crap, because you know what? You're going to feel like crap in this game, and you learn how to push through it. So I thoroughly agree with that. But the more we use those wearables, the more popular they become, I think the better they're going to get. I think those companies are going to keep wanting to help make things, and better. So let's go back to the massage guns and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I had an about the vibrating rollers and the massage guns. He goes, well, what does this do? I'm like, I don't know. I know you feel better when you use it. And so that's most of why it's here. What's your hypothesis as to what a vibrating foam roller does versus a let's call it an analog roller?
I don't know. Because I haven't had guys using, like, we have all the stuff, like we have lacrosse balls and foam rollers and all of it. But I have tempering tools that I use, and
tempering, big one now.
Guys, and if you're interested in reading, one of the only guys I know of who's putting out true research about it is a guy named Dr. Christopher Tabor. Okay. He's from Sacred Heart University. He's been on my podcast a couple times. Super good dude, and he's putting out, hey, we're going to take these tempers to D1 football players and see what happens, So,
what is he doing? Biopsies? Is he doing MRIs?
No,
what is he doing?
I don't think he did biopsies. I'll send you, when we get done here, I'll send you the link.
Thank you.
Free access. So with the tempers, the messed up part is you can't get away from it. Like you just have to take it. But with the foam rolling, you can guard against it. You can kind of tense up, but a temper, you can't run anywhere. And especially, there's some wild stuff that we'll do. I don't think anything I do is definitely nothing new, nothing revolutionary. I just look at people who are way smarter than me, and then I cherry pick that and then put it together and spit it out. But like from Donnie Thompson, where where he's talking about my 4-year-old daughter dropping off thank you. That's great. Okay, go play in your room for a minute. Thanks. So where Donnie Thompson is talking about for the QL, like you'll have guys lay on their side and then basically elevate one leg to neutralize the pelvis. And then you'll put a 50, 80, or 110 pound temper right in the QL. Oh. And then they can suddenly side bend. The degrees of improvement are crazy. Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of stuff with the temper tools and been getting, and then as far as why and how the vibrating stuff works or whatever, I don't know. I think some of it's a little more placebo effect at this point, where it's, I don't know, it seems kind of like bad,
Well, let me throw this out there and see if I sound like an idiot or borderline crazy person. Is
not a completely crazy person, just a
borderline. Not completely, just borderline crazy.
Like one of those guys.
So who was it? So Troy Hirschman, he was the athletic trainer at Ball State.
Yeah.
Worked with him with basketball. We had a conversation one day about the vibrating foam rollers and the guns. And we were talking about massage and how the use of epilage in massage is to basically not turn off, but just tone down some of the nerve endings. And so people that are highly sensitive, if you start a massage with epilage, then the massage session isn't as painful for them. And so we were wondering so the vibration in the rollers and the vibration in the guns, do you think it could possibly be just it desensitizes the superficial nerves just long enough for you to push deeper into a massage? So like the tempering stuff, you can't run from the tempering stuff. I get it, and that's good. But for self massage, like if you're using a foam roller that vibrates, we came to the hypothesis that maybe it desensitizes like an epilage those superficial layers of the nerve endings, and then that allows you to get past the sensitivity area of where your brain says, "Hey, this is painful. We got to stop this," and allows you to get a little deeper into the work. I don't know. That was just a thought we had.
Yeah, that's not a bad thought. I mean, it kind of sounds like a preparatory, for the more intense work. Almost like what you're talking about with the weight room. This is the same thing for recovery and restoration. Because as an example, my wife is she has ADHD and she's like very sensitive to any kind of external touch and stimuli. So, if I was just if she had a tight forearm, for example, and I put my thumb to work out a knot in her forearm, she would jump initially because she's so sensitive. Mm-hmm. But, so maybe that would be a better approach, is take that Theragun or vibrating tool and like run it on her forearm, for example. And then okay, I can understand that it's not going to kill me. It's going to be okay. And then I can work into a massage or whatever that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly possible. The guys, we've got the Hyper Ice backpacks that have the Normatex and the gun, all that stuff in there. So they don't understand how nice they have it right now, because they're gonna go do other things and go be placed all over the world. And some of the places, I mean, they're going to have a gym that's maybe the size of the couch I'm sitting on right now. If you want to call it, but
yeah. Oh yeah.
So the big thing is just the consistency aspect, of trying new stuff. And I give them the analogy of it's a buffet. You want to come in and you want to sample a little bit of everything because you don't know what you're going to like. What if the greatest thing on the planet is sitting right over there and you're like, I don't want to try it.
Yeah. So I teach the exercise 420 class. Well, I taught it this spring, and I'm teaching it in the fall. I taught it in the fall as well. One of the things I talk about with the kids in that class is we're talking about squatting, benching, deadlifting, and we're going to get into Olympic lifting next week. And I was talking about with squats, and the big debate is obviously high bar, low bar, wide stance, narrow stance, and all that. I'm like, well, it depends. What feels comfortable for you? you try it all out, try something out. You never know what you're going to find out. Oh, I'm really good at this. And I didn't know that. Like, I had a kid in class. She says she's a conventional deadlifter. And then we had her do sumo and she's like, wow, this is really comfortable. I'm like, oh, it's your body telling you that, if your plan is to get strong, here's a great way for you to get strong. You can pick up a lot of weight, if it feels comfortable for you, So yeah, try those different things out. I agree with you. Do the smorgasbord. Now, obviously, training is there has to be a linear path of, I'm going from point A to point B, but there is no one way. There is no, perfect exercise, perfect tool, perfect anything. You've heard me say now, I love Olympic lifting, I love Olympic lifting, I love lifting, but I don't make all of my athletes Olympic lift. I allow those who want to definitely do it. If you say you want to do it, we're definitely going to do it. And I encourage those who don't truly have a preference, but they look apprehensive. And I'm willing to take months of just working with bar work, just, getting positioning ready. It's not, for Olympic lifting, what I like about it is the movement quality is really good. You're getting good range of motions. You're working on speed. You're working on loading the body. So there's a lot of good things to it. But it's not a perfect exercise by any stretch of imagination. It's just a tool that I like to use. So yeah, get out there and use those tools.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is another couple guys I've had on this podcast was Stuart Young, who's a coach at Kansas University and has a team that he coaches online called True Strength Performance, and it's all Olympic lifting. It's an Olympic lifting team. I can't remember Young's level, but he's like a USAW national level coach. I mean, legit good coach. And I was asking him about like the trap bar jump shrugs versus Olympic lifts and all this, and another guy, Dr. Tim Sukumal, who does all weightlifting derivatives. He very rarely in his research he'll have guys catch bars and things like that, but he's going to go like more high pulls from different positions, from hang, from blocks, and so on. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I've asked Dr. Sukumal, I've talked to a lot of people about like trap bar jump shrugs or Olympic lifting, what's better. And the smartest guys that I know of keep coming back to, it doesn't freaking matter. It's not black and white. It's a ton of gray that exists. Yeah. And then using the most appropriate tool for the given situation. And I think a lot of times people get caught up in like, well, I want to have an answer. There has to be a dichotomy. You're either this or you're that. It's like, man, there's too much going on that we got to consider. Yeah. And you may have an athlete front squatting, you may have another one high bar back squatting, and so on. But that's the other part I love about Olympic lifting is it makes you load. It humbles the hell out of you. So it makes you load at such a slow rate that if you just show up and you do it every day, you're going to get your major stuff done. Yeah. So
it's a bang for buck. Yeah. For me, it's a bang for buck exercise.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah. You're saying that, there's a lot of gray. This is something that I've always taken from Dr. Galpin, even when he was at Ball State. He always says it depends.
Yeah.
Every single question. Yeah. You ask him, he'll go, well, it depends.
Yep.
And he'll go through and explain to you like the varying factors that he's aware of and that he's, he can show you, the paths to, but even then beyond that, he'll go, and there's probably things I don't know. And so it depends, and so I agree with what you're saying. There's people that get really into, wanting to have the answers, and I tell my coach, or I tell my athletes, and I even tell my class now, like nobody has all the answers. You can't. I was talking to my men's volleyball team last night. These guys, it's funny, like you throw out a few bits of jargon, like anatomy or physiology or stuff like that. Or you can happen to cover several different topics and they'll go, oh man, you're so smart. I'm like, and I tell them like, my weight room is 3,400 square feet. And if I gathered all of my knowledge that I was 100% sure of, I could just about fill a teacup. Like it's just so vast. Like there's so much information out there that no one has it all. No one really does. And so, to get results, You just have to look at the kids that you're working with, or the clients you're working with, and get them to do things that you see them get better at. And that doesn't mean that they can't go someplace else and get better as well. That's not what we're saying. And I think that's where I want to say that's probably the biggest issue in the field of strength conditioning is everyone thinks that they have to have all this proprietary information about, here's how we do it. Here's our secrets, stuff like that. I'm like, I hope it's working. That's all. I mean, the bottom line is I hope it's working. Whatever you're doing, just let it work. Yeah. There's lots of different ways to get it done.
Yeah. And that's something, when I was doing my graduate assistantship with Kevin Schultz, he's now the director at University of Wisconsin-Madison, but he was, when I was with him at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. And we were talking about programming one day, and he's like, there's 1,000 programs out there. And he goes, man, I wish most people would just pick one and work their ass off. But most people don't understand hard work. And most people don't understand delayed gratification. They want everything right now. They don't understand that the training they're doing now is going to set them up for harder training later, Yeah. I was just reading a book this morning where it talked about, it had a quote from Leonardo da Vinci, I believe, and it said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, man, that's spot on for what I do, is just trying to hey, we're just going to do the basics and not trying to be anything fancy. We're just trying to do simple and do simple better, but yeah. Man, I think we covered a lot. So I'll go through.
I hope we got at least a minute's worth of good stuff in there.
Yeah. And I totally feel I meant to include there. I feel the Dunning-Kruger effect. Hey, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you first get into a field and you think you know everything, and you're like, oh, this is easy. And then the more people you talk to, the more you read, you're like, I don't know anything. And then every day you show up, you're like, I really don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you on any social media or anything like that? Do you want to give out email or anything for people to reach out with questions, or what do you?
If anybody wants to email me, they can email me at jroberson, so my last name with a J in front of it, at bsu.edu. I'm not really on social media. I follow a bunch of people, but I don't post anything. So, don't look. I'm not that smart, so don't look for answers from me. I'm more learning than anything. So, I'm a consummate learner, but I'm not the advisor that people are sometimes look for. And so I'm not the front runner in the Instagram or Twitter, field. So, but if they want to ask me questions, I'd love to discuss things, and hash things out and find out what they know. And if I can add to their knowledge, that would be great. I'd love to help.